all the time. 3, 2, 1, and we're live. All right. So, hello everybody. This is the third Wednesday of the month, and if you've been to one of these before, whether you're in New York or Austin, you've heard me say this before, but it is the Node.js Meetup, both New York and Austin. How about that? And we're online. It's crazy. We have got a couple of great speakers that are going to be streaming live to you today. First up, we're going to have Aori and Nevo, who is on the line with us right now, talking about scaling horizontally with a tool called Shepherd. Really cool looking tool for managing many repos for distributed applications. After that, we're going to have a lightning talk by Sebastiaan Dekkers. By the way, Aori is joining us from New York City. And Sebastiaan Dekkers will be joining us from Austin, and he's going to showcase a open source project of his using Gopher. So most people probably don't remember Gopher, but that was a super early internet protocol, and Sebastiaan has built some really cool node tools for working with that. Usually this would be where we thank our sponsors for hosting us, but we're all at home, so hopefully everybody has a coconut water or beer or whatever it is they like to drink. And usually when I do these also, I like to make these intros quick and snappy and get out of the way. So with that, let's hand it over to Aori Nevo, and we will see a great talk on scaling horizontally with Shepherd. Aori?
Awesome. Thanks, Matt. I'd like to start by thanking the organizers. So Matt, thank you very much for putting this together, the time and effort you've taken to do this. It's actually a lot of work. So definitely wanted to thank you for doing that and providing us with a way to still have these meetups. I'd also like to thank the folks at NerdWallet for creating and open sourcing Shepherd. This is the tool that we will be discussing today. Hope everyone is doing well and keeping safe. I'm certainly excited to share this talk with you, so let's get started. Let me share my screen. I'm disabled from, all right. So you should be seeing my screen now with the first slide. So the title of this talk, it's need to make a horizontal change across 100+ microservices. No worries, Shepherd's got you covered. A little bit about myself. Currently a software development manager at AWS. Before that, I was senior engineering manager at Pager, a healthcare tech startup. Was there for about a year and a half. Before that, I was engineering manager at Bloomingdale's for about 3 years. And before that, or all the time actually, is open source contributor and maintainer to several popular open source packages, like Shepherd, Yards, Happy, Handlebars, New Relic, and Foundation, and many more. I've also spent some time in the Army. I spent a good chunk of my life in education as an academic, about 12 years there. So, and with no surprise, one of my hobbies is coding. By the way, social handles are all the same as my first and last name, so feel free to add me on Twitter, LinkedIn, wherever. All right, so always good to start a talk with an abstract. So in this talk, you'll be introduced to an innovative, powerful, flexible, and easy to use tool developed by the folks at NerdWallet that's aimed to simplify some of the complexities around making horizontal changes and service-oriented systems via automation. Whatever that's up about the abstract, it's how to do this in a service-oriented system via automation. So what's the problem statement here? It's always good to start with that as well. So in a highly distributed system comprised of multiple repos, we want to make a change to some non-empty subset programmatically. So imagine you have like 100 repos that tie to like 100 services. It's about making those changes in a programmatic way where manual intervention is minimized. So why would you want to do this, right? I want to do this by example, it suggests why. Also, why here, that's the Shepherd mascot. Each sheet is a repo. So the first example is making a code change in the existing workflow. What does that look like? What is the existing way to make a code change? I make some assumptions here, and you can argue about order, but I think we can understand that these are more or less the steps you would go through. So suppose you have n repos and you want to make some change to a non-empty subset S. So think about like making a change to the renovate JSON, the ESLint RC file, something of that nature. Well, for each repo in S, you would fork and clone the repo to your local. You would find and update the relevant code. You would stage the changes, commit the changes, push the commit to your remote, open a PR to upstream, solicit reviews and approvals, hopefully land commits on upstream, and release the changes to lower level environments, test and promote through to production. You can argue about, or it's open to debate about the order of these things. I realize that. Another example would be adding a new file. What you'll notice here is that the steps are pretty much the same. And I just highlight that step 2B is where you have the difference, right? In the first example, you were finding and updating the relevant code, whereas in this example, you're adding a file, but everything else stays the same. So the observations are that in both examples, steps 2A through 2F are effectively the same if we choose the right abstraction layer, and that's relative to that item 2B. Also, we observe that the time needed to make these changes is directly proportional to the size of the task. Lastly, provided that there's some programmatic way of identifying which repos should be in the set S, as well as a programmatic way to apply the changes to the repos, then we can effectively abstract out these steps into some sort of a script. Like we don't need a human running these things. And you can really think of Shepherd as that abstraction layer. So finally, we get to the definition of Shepherd. Shepherd is an open source CLI tool developed at NerdWallet that coordinates the application of code changes across multiple repos, from checking them out to making the changes to submitting pull requests. So think of Shepherd in this way. Shepherd is the code as what migrations are to databases. For those of you who have worked with migrations for databases, this will feel a lot like that. Installation steps. So this is just kidding. It's really not that hard. It's pretty short. You do npm install -g, the package name, and that's it. You want to verify the install via the CLI, simply run shepherd --help. What you should see is the Shepherd help menu. Note that if you want to install this off of Git, then you should run npm run build post install before install. On to demos. So demo 1 is going to be focused on adding a manifest file to a couple of repos. But I want you to keep in mind that while we only look at 2 repos here, think of this as like you trying to do this to 100 repos, right? Shepherd depends on a YAML file, it's shepherd.yaml. So whenever you invoke a Shepherd command, it's going to need a reference to some sort of a shepherd.yaml file. And this is what you see here on this slide. I've nested it in a project, like you see in the top right, but you can choose to put these files wherever you like and organize them however you like as well. This is just the way that made sense to me to organize the files. And so just so we're clear, these are the commands that I will be running. These are all Shepherd commands, and it will automate the things that we want done. So I'll pop into my command line. Actually, before that, since these will be operations that automate some of the things that will be done for you on Git, I just want to first introduce you to the 2 repos. They're publicly available under my name. So you have a Shepherd test repo 1, and you also have a Shepherd test repo 2. And what you should observe is that these repos don't really have much in them, just a README file and nothing else. Also note that there's no pull requests open at this time. And finally, that there's no branches created here. Shepherd will create all these things for us, and that's why it's important to highlight those things before we do anything else. All right, so now I'm going to pop into the command line and start executing some Shepherd commands. So first I want to check that Shepherd is globally available. And so we do Shepherd --help, and we see the help menu. Also, every command that we're going to run, it's easy to verify that it's working or doing the right thing. All the Shepherd commands that you invoke can be verified in Shepherd's working directory, which is at the home directory under .shepherd. Okay. So first command to run, back to the slides, is to run the checkout command. So as you notice, there's no Shepherd YAML file in this directory, and that's why it's complaining. But in this directory, there is. So I'll run Shepherd checkout stop. And so what it's done is it's cloned locally the two repos identified in the Shepherd YAML file. If I cat the Shepherd file, it's the same as in the slide. But what you can see here is under search query, I'm passing it some information that identifies these two repos on Git and then pulls them down. So you can control that using this parameter. I want to verify that this actually did what it was supposed to do. Remember, I mentioned that everything can be verified by looking at Shepherd's working directory. So I'm going to go in next. Okay. So under the Shepherd directory, you see something familiar. This was in the manifest file, but that was the Shepherd YAML file. That was the ID. Under here, you'll see a few things like repos. So let's see what's in there. Under there, you see my name. That's reference to GitHub. And finally, under there, you see the two projects. So Shepherd has pulled down these two projects for me, these two repos. And both of them are already Git repos, so I can do a Git status there and see that there's no changes to stage or commit or do anything. And that's expected, right? Because I haven't told Shepherd to apply any changes yet. That's what I'm going to do next, right? So do Shepherd apply dot. Okay, so now Shepherd did something, right? It applied some changes. And underneath the hood, if you look at the way that the manifest file is written, there's a line in there that says execute. The apply parameter is executing a shell script. And in there is some logic to do something. We don't know what. And we can take a look, that's for sure. But let's just see what it did by inspecting the working directory. Okay, looks like a manifest file was added. Okay, what's inside of it? Just a comment saying contents of manifest.yaml. Now, I didn't make that change manually, right? Shepherd ran that. It executed it via shell script. All right, but I want to make sure that this is also executed for each project that was identified as part of the search query. And remember, there's two of them. So let's look at the other Shepherd test repo. And if I do a git status here, I see there's also a change for the same file. And if I look at the content, it's the same. So Shepherd has identified these two repos. Imagine there were 100 of them. It would have done the same thing. And you wouldn't have had to stage and commit all those changes manually. So really great stuff here. All right, so what's next? So I've applied the changes, checked out the repos, I've applied the changes programmatically. Now I want to commit and push them. Okay, so go back to the external session, and I run Shepherd commit. Okay. So it's doing what we would usually do without this is doing the git add and then git commit. And it's pulling the commit message from the manifest file. So whatever you put in there, it's using that configuration to set the commit message. Let's take a look here. If I do a git status now, it's clean. If I do a git log, I can see this commit was generated for me by Shepherd. Yeah. Also, I want to verify that this was done to both projects, not just the second test repo. So let's look at the first one. clean. And if I look at the log, same commit message. Okay. All right. So I guess the next thing to do is to push these changes to my remote. Remember, there were no branches on upstream, right? There were no pull requests there either. So I'll use shepherd push dot. This could fail, just disclaimer, because I've created this branch multiple times before. I've deleted it just to make sure things were working right. If it does fail, it just means adding a force option to this. Okay, so I'll put the force. Awesome. So now if I want to check this, I'm not going to check it locally because it actually did something on GitHub. So let's go to GitHub right now. Let's refresh. And you have a branch created for you, right? This wasn't here before. We checked that in the beginning. So Shepherd has created a branch on upstream for you. That's awesome. Okay. And at this point, you can choose to manually create the pull request. But that would kind of be like defeating the purpose, right? Like Shepherd was supposed to be this abstraction layer that automates a lot of these manual steps for it. So actually, I wouldn't go ahead and sort of like do this right now. I would think, hey, Shepherd, what are the commands to get this, to do this for us? So that's shepherd PR dot, and it's the last command. But you can always inspect your PR before creating them on the repos. And so let's do that. And so we can see that the PR description will have add manifest file in the description. Okay. So I'm happy with this. So let's go ahead and create the PR now via Shepherd. Awesome. So let's confirm that this is the case. If I refresh now, you can see there's a pull request on upstream. And if I look at the pull request, it has the right changes in it. And if I look at the description, it says it's what we saw in the command line. So looks good. Let's also confirm that this is applied to test repo 2. So if I go to pull request, there's a pull request there. Description looks good. Commit message is semantic, so looks good, good title. So executed well. Shepherd did what it was supposed to do, right? So in no way did I need to do any sort of manual intervention here, right? I could have easily baked this into some CI, CD to do this for me, right? But underneath the hood, it requires this manifest Shepherd YAML file. Okay, so again, it needs something like this. Okay, let me, since now I'm done with the command line, let me go back to the presentation mode. In 1 second here. All right, awesome. So this completes the first demo, and the second demo I've actually changed into an exercise. So think about maybe you want to add an engines property to your package.json. Maybe it's just not there, or maybe it's there and you just want to update the node version, the node Semver, the npm Semver range. So that's the exercise. Couple of questions. What would the shell command look like to apply this sort of change? And another question, what would the shepherd.yaml file look like? We saw what it looked like for adding a manifest YAML file. What would it, some shell script, what would it look like for this change? And lastly, can you do this in a way where you don't have to rely on a shell file? Maybe there's a way to do this just using shepherd.yaml. I could tell you, so like a spoiler alert, is that Shepherd YAML is flexible enough where you can execute these commands within that file. You don't need to rely on an external shell file. But you should, there's a trade-off there. You should balance these things, right? If the commands are complicated and complex in nature, I would split that out of the shepherd.yaml file. Okay, so that's an exercise for you. Let's look at the return on our investment here. What would it be? It's certainly not wool. So a bunch of stuff, right? It reduces time to delivery, it increases productivity, increases velocity, increases efficiency. It's self-documenting, which is something we know already from writing migration scripts for databases, right? But this is for code, so we know exactly what was done to our repos. It's very repeatable because this is scripted, right? There's no manual intervention here. It also helps you identify opportunities to simplify things. Horizontal changes like these are somewhat of an indicator we should at least consider some different approaches, right? If this is a repetitive change that cuts across your stack, or is a recurrent horizontal change, maybe think about creating a package, an NPM package that encapsulates that logic, and then installing it across your system, and then leverage Sunbird to mitigate the risk in doing those upgrades. What that does is it reduces the problem to dependency management tooling or processes problem. So that's always good. So maybe you would look at renovate bot or dependent bot at that point. Not saying that that's always the case or that's what you should do, but it's something to consider when you're seeing these horizontal changes cropping up multiple times. This is a relatively new tool, and so how do you get involved? Remember, these sheep are repos. So how to get involved? We have a Slack channel, so put the short link on the slide. I'll share out the slides after the talk. You could go to GitHub, open an issue there, ask questions, get involved with any good first issues that are tagged on there. This link will give you a list of those. And I've also provided an example of a particular issue that I thought was really good to highlight the sort of good first issues that get opened up. What about future work? Where is Shepherd headed? What does the roadmap look like? There's a few things, and these are somewhat of an order, I guess. At least number one is the highest priority. Upgrading to latest OctaKit. This is an SDK maintained by GitHub, and it's what we use to interact with GitHub. So when you do checkout and when you're pushing to upstream underneath the hood, we're using OctaKit. OctaKit has gone a huge refactor, and it's pretty awesome work, but it does require some changes, and we've started work in that direction. And so if you're interested, if you're curious, take a look at the issue and the relevant PRs that are open for it already. Happy to review any contributions to that end or for any of these. Branding, you notice that when we opened the PR, there was like a bracket Shepherd in the commit message. We want to be able to brand that for different companies, right? As your company X, you want your name there. So there's a branding component to this, improved configuration systems, use of GitHub's GraphQL APIs, common migration script utilities, and workflow improvement are all some of the things that we have in mind for future work. References here. There's an awesome blog written by Nathan Walters at NerdWallet. He goes into tremendous depth on this blog about the different parts of Shepherd, more examples to look at. I highly encourage anyone that's interested in Shepherd to give this a read. Really well written, and gives you a good overview, thorough overview of the tool. Two other links here. One is to a reference to Shepherd on NPM, and the other one is to Shepherd on GitHub. And that's it. So thanks again, Matt, and everyone for tuning in. And giving me the time to share this with you all.
This is where we usually have a big round of applause and everybody would go wild and people would probably grab another coconut water. Instead, it's just me, but there are others watching online. They're probably clapping right now. So Q&A. So you've got myself and Sebastiaan on the line. I got a couple questions. First off, I think this tool is awesome. And I love seeing these types of tools. I specifically geek out about tools that help you be more efficient when working across many repos in a distributed system. And I've put together assemblies of tools in the past to help make this easier for myself. And I've written some simple tools. So I love seeing something come together that has a bit more polish like this. So just to understand, and maybe we can just look at your file system. I want to understand kind of what the moving parts are. So there's a .shepherd folder, and inside of that are your two repos. Is that basically it? Like there's a, so what is the folder in which that .shepherd folder lives?
So I put it in, so this could be really flat. You can just have shepherd.yaml files like at the root, like very flat. And have Shepherd execute on those. But I like to structure them as if these were database migration scripts, which each get their own directory in some sense. At least that's how I've organized it in the past. But really, it's just the file that you need to have a reference to. So all that matters here is the shepherd.yaml file. So when you're executing your command, as long as it's a path to a Shepherd YAML file, you're good to go. And then if that configuration is set up correctly, it will do what you've asked it to do.
Cool. And so is the intention that this folder itself will also be a repo and it kind of contains the different changes that you have implemented as migrations across your code? Like, is this a tool for handling large code-based migrations for many repos? Is that kind of what you see it as?
Yeah, absolutely. So this I would commit and have it as a separate repo. Maybe call it like Shepherd migrations,
Cool.
Shepherd migration scripts. Just have it there and accessible to the engineering team, and they can pull it down and track that history over time.
Very cool. Cool. Yeah, I think that was the main set of questions that I had. This is a really cool tool. Thanks for taking the time to hop on and present it to us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. Okay, let me just type with Sebastiaan here, and we'll see if he's ready to go.
Sound.
I'm sure it's going to be fine. Cool. Yeah, so I'll stop sharing over here on Aori, and we will move it over to Sebastiaan.
Okay, so I guess I'll screen share here for a second. And I'll just do the entire desktop. So can you see this all right? Should be good.
Yep, see it great.
All right. Okay. So I'm going to be talking about Gopher protocol and how I'm using it with the web platform. So my name is Sebastiaan. Let's go by Seb Deckers on most social platforms. This is a side project to my side project. I mostly do some freelance development. By the way, if you're in need for a JavaScript person for a couple of months, then I'm all yours for hire. So my side project is actually a CDN, a open source network for hosting, for DNS, for all kinds of cool stuff. And this is sort of a side project to that, which is to support Gopher protocol. And I'm really just doing this mostly for fun because I like it. And because there isn't enough Gopher in the world right now. And a lot of people are kind of playing with it. And I figured we should bring it onto the best platform, which is the one with JavaScript on the web. And the backend is all Node. So Gopher, yeah, okay. If you're 700 years old like me, there's probably something tickling your memory right now and going like Gopher, that's all this command line kind of stuff. So there's all these clients in pretty much every language since the last 30 years probably that implement Gopher because it's a very simple protocol. It's all sort of text-based menu style. And it's available for all these different platforms. I'm just showing you some random ones now. So if you look it up you come across this thing. It's started in 1991. It's an alternative to the World Wide Web. It's very lightweight, uses fewer network resources than web services. Okay, so it's because it's really doesn't do much, but it's extremely good at transferring little bits of information in a plain text format, which is all you really need. And it's currently being used by sort of side project kind of folks like me. And it looks like this. So if you start off with like, what is the web, right? You open a page and you view source and you see a bunch of HTML. This is what you would do if you looked at the source on the right-hand side of a Gopher page on the left-hand side. It's almost exactly the same because it is. The first character of every line denotes the type of content of that line. So you'd see I for just plain text, and you'd see 0 for a link to another menu. And this itself is a menu, and it's got a little search thing in there below. So it's just very, very plain stuff. Why would you do this? Because it's really fast. So if you want to provide information in low bandwidth environments, Gopher is ideal for that because it doesn't do much. It has almost no features because, like headers and stuff doesn't exist in Gopher. Why would you want them? I also like the fact that it's private by default, and that's more because it doesn't support tracking. There's no cookies, there's no embedded resources like scripts and tracking and pixels and all that kind of thing. It's just plain text. One request is one response. There's no sub resources, and it's really hard to track because all the modern web stuff is based on making more requests from within the browser, and Gopher just doesn't do that. This also means that as a user, you have total control over every request that hits the network coming from your Gopher client, your Gopher browser. Web browsers, it's difficult to control that because JavaScript in the background could be doing all kinds of fanciful long polling requests and WebSockets and God, who knows what. In today's world, where privacy is kind of a big deal and there's some forms of censorship and cloud providers are becoming fewer and larger in numbers, Gopher kind of, because it's so simple, you can create your own server, client, etc. It's a nice alternative. And after all, plain text is king at presenting information in a very efficient manner. So today, Gopher is popular with these retro computing. If you're running Raspberry Pis at home or want to do something with them, Gopher might be the thing for you. April Fools, yeah, people play around with it and once in a while do a little April Fools Gopher thing, like make their website available through Gopher only. So how do we bring this onto the web platform, which is like this cool browser stuff that we all use every day? Currently, there's popular services that turn, or rather a very popular Gopher to HTML service, which does the backend Gopher requests, translates it into HTML, and vomits that out to your web browser over HTTPS. And that's just horrible. But it works, and people still play around with it. And it's kind of like if you're feeling nostalgic and you want to look at a Gopher page, but you don't want to be bothered to install a Gopher client and all that, then you just use this kind of thing. But I thought we could do better because Gopher doesn't have to be limited to these text HTML type of things. You can have images and all kinds of, you can have videos, you can have PDFs, all kinds of binary files and things in theory. So I implemented it in practice. And this is my little client called Gaufre, which is a French word for waffle, but it just sounds like a Gopher protocol. Here it is. If you go to gopher.commons host, the link was displayed at the bottom this entire time. Check it out and play around with it. If you don't like to talk, just go find some random stuff on Gopherverse. There's a lot of cool stuff. It's kind of like browsing the web 20 years ago, where you just comb through lists of links and you find random content. It's pretty entertaining. So, but if you want to do that, check out gopher.commons host. That's the client. The top thing has a little URL bar where you just click on the links and start navigating. You can even install this as a PWA as of 2 days ago, thanks to a nice pull request. If you're using Chrome, PWA will make it like a native-looking app. But it's really just a single page of HTML, JavaScript, and CSS. So the problem with bringing Gopher onto the web platform is that JavaScript doesn't have access to just raw TCP sockets. And that's all Gopher is. It's TCP port 70. Like HTTP is 80 or HTTPS is 443 or SSH is something else, etc. So you've got TCP on port 70, and that's it. But JavaScript can't talk that. So we have to introduce something called Gopher over HTTP. where instead of translating it to Gopher menus into like sort of HTML that looks like Gopher, we just tunnel Gopher directly over an HTTP response. It's really straightforward. The HTTP client, like your web browser, could be other things as well that speak HTTP, makes a request to a Gopher over HTTP proxy, and that request is really just the Gopher URL. The Gopher request then goes as an actual Gopher request to a Gopher server, which sends its plain text response back on port 70, and then the Gopher over HTTP proxy returns that to the HTTP client as a HTTP response body. Very simple. We copy that idea from DNS over HTTP. It's a really simple protocol for doing the same thing with DNS requests and responses to look up domain names. The cool thing is that it doesn't require any changes to the Gopher protocol. It's just transporting it. It's just blind to the content, which I don't want to change something that's been around for that long. I just want to wrap it into something modern and add another layer to the abstraction stack, right? That's how network protocols evolve. Now, the Gopher request just has a header, application, Gopher, MIME type, and you stick the Gopher URL into the query parameter, and that's it. So if you curl that URL there, proxy, obviously you have to run a Gopher proxy, but if you just provide a URL like that to a Gopher over HTTP proxy, you'll get back a Gopher page over HTTP. The response will contain, again, application Gopher as its content type header. So you can imagine that with Node.js, it's almost a one-liner. I mean, it's a little bit more involved, but it's very straightforward because the concept is so simple. You take the request URL and you send it out over a network connection with TCP module, and you pipe back the response to the HTTP client, and that's it. A little bit of error handling. So let's do Gopher hosting. How do you actually build content and make it available over Gopher? So you have to run something on port 70, right? So that kind of restricts you because there's no concept of headers. There's no like host header or authority pseudo header like HTTP 2 and 3. So what you have to do is run one domain only on a server with one IP address, and that's annoying because you might want to do virtual hosting, multiple websites or multiple Gopher sites. Sorry, on a single computer would require multiple IP addresses, and those are expensive. So how do we fix that? So I have seen some hacks, like people put everything on a single domain and then use subdirectories, but it's not very pretty. HTTP went through the same problem and solved it with HTTPS by introducing a header, but we don't have headers in Gopher, so we can't really do that. There's only the path. There's no hostname in the request. So what else do we do? Well, what if we use TLS? We add another protocol to our stack, another encapsulation. Fantastic. So TLS is how you secure HTTP, right? It becomes HTTPS. And that provides a nice thing called SNI, server name identification. What we're just doing is taking Gopher and sticking it into TLS, so we're not even changing Gopher again. And so anyway, like with the same thing HTTPS does, we use SNI, the server name identification, to look up the domain name that's being connected to. And TLS has this because, well, TLS servers need to know which certificate to use for this connection. And so that's very convenient because we can just pass that through to the Gopher layer. Now, basically what's happening is we've got a plain text Gopher client that's connecting to an IP address, or we've got a Gopher over TLS client that's first doing a TLS connection with the SNI, the server name. And then inside of that, once that's been established, then we do a Gopher request. So now the Gopher over TLS server can use that prior information, that SNI server name, to return the Gopher response based on that server name. So we can essentially now do virtual hosting for Gopher, which is kind of a cool thing. Yeah, of course, you need to check whether there's TLS support, and if not, then you still fall back to a traditional Gopher over TCP. So let's see how it goes. If we have Gopher client open, I recommend you try this out. Oh, yeah, okay. The colors on your screen are not freaking out. That's just showing off the themes in Gopher. what you can do is open up the client. Okay. What's happening here is, so yellow bits are sort of like what's happening on HTTP like with JavaScript. So it's loading the URL Gopher Commons host, and then tagging onto that is actually a Gopher URL. And that Gopher URL is being loaded, and you'll see this in the green URL bar. That's where we're seeing Gopher over HTTP. If you look at the first request in the network tab in the dev tools, the first one is actually the client itself. That's Gaufre, the client. The second one is favicon, okay, ignore. And the third one was going to be the Gopher over HTTPS request, and that's showing that in the via header that TLS was actually used to connect to this particular Gopher site, which is just showing the commons.host Gopher site. Anyway, all of that. And we're going to skip a little bit because this is too detailed. It's basically showing there's different layers going on here, but basically we have a Gopher client, we have a Gopher proxy, and we have a Gopher server. It's just confusing because they're all called commons host, and I wrote all of them, so it's all kind of like looking the same thing now. It's available if you're going to use this for any kind of like scraping and crawling and doing interesting things. Please don't use this proxy. Run it yourself. It's open source. Contribute your own resources to the world instead of taking away from these kind volunteers who collaboratively host this network. But that's really easy to do. npx Gopher to spin up the client, npx go to run a local proxy, open up the browser to localhost page port 3000. You've got the client running, and then in the settings menu you can enter your Go proxy, and it'll be 100% local. And so publishing Gopher content, well, all you have to do is publish a Gopher map, which is kind of like an index.html. It's kind of like the entry point to a Gopher page. You can deploy it to the Commons host CDN. There's instructions available, documentation, etc. I'll just do a quick demo of that. So I'll show you how to make a website and a Gopher page on the same domain. And it's really straightforward. And you can deploy this for free. So let me just do a quick demo here. So I've got a directory here. So if I look at the current directory, it's got a Gopher. Okay, we've got the current directory. We've got index.html, a Gopher directory, which contains a Gopher map. Take a look at that. Here it is. So on the left-hand side, you've got a Gopher map file, which contains like the syntax that I showed earlier, where the first character, like I, indicates that this is just a plain text menu line. And on the right-hand side, you've got index.html, which is just a pre-formatted tag. It's barbarically minimalist HTML syntax, but they should both basically show the same thing. And the little top line will indicate whether or not this works, because we should be able to dual stack browse this either as HTTP or as Gopher and see the respective content. I'm going to just deploy that and see what happens. So if I run npx commons host deploy, I want to deploy the current directory. Here we go. It's going to just try to guess some names. I'll just take the current domain name. And there we go. And if we open this up, then we have our HTML page. Hang on a second. Yeah. Okay, so if we then go to Gopher commons host, and we take the same URL. So now we've got the Gopher clients. If I enter, I'm going to be visiting the Gopher page, and you can verify this by doing this at home. So you can see, hang on a second, here we go. We have our Gopher page via Gopher and via HTTP. So this is something cool, because this is also being served on a CDN, so it'll be fast anywhere in the world. In fact, I believe this might be the first Gopher CDN ever, because CDNs weren't really a thing in the age of Gopher. Oh. So anyway, where were we? Almost done. Gopher as a service. So, okay, that was a little demo of how to publish content on Gopher. But what if you want to do something more exciting? Okay, so you can run your own Gopher server. Like I said, it's just port 70. It's really straightforward. You can do this with frameworks and servers in many different languages and frameworks of your choice. But of course, you're a Node developer, so I've created a little thing called Gopher server, npm goth, which would stand for Gopher over TLS and HTTP. So with Gopher server, you can extend it, and it's very similar to the net server, like a standard TCP server. It gives you the same options as like a TLS server or a net server, and just gives you events whenever a Gopher client connects, and then it'll connect either over TCP or TLS. So it handles that negotiation for you. That's kind of the only thing it does. And then it's up to you to build apps with this. So you could build something like a Fastify or a Express or a Connect framework type of thing that handles routes and all that kind of cool stuff. You could probably connect your existing web apps very simply to something like Gopher server and just switch around a little bit of the routing. So check out the Gopher server package. And then there's TLS Router, which is another thing that I've played around with TLS and SNI and another TLS feature called ALPN, ALPN. So you can route traffic. So you would run TLS Router as a sort of load balancer almost. And behind it, you would run a traditional plain text Gopher server, or many of them, one for each domain, let's say. And this TLS router would pick up on the different routing rules, which backend server to forward client requests or client connections to. So it could do it based on protocols and ports and stuff. So this way you could have virtual hosting for existing Gopher servers, and they don't have to speak Node or anything like that. You just run this in front of it. Like I said, kind of like a load balancer. You can also use this programmatically. So there's, oh, this is duplicated, sorry. So on the left-hand side, you've got sort of a command line interface to it, and right-hand side, you can run it as just JavaScript code and build on top of it. Check out the README, the NPM package, and all that stuff. I'm not going to go into that into this talk. So with that, I'd say go forth and burrow. You can still be the first something. You can make any kind of service really and be the first one that supports Gopher. Thank you for watching my talk. And if there's any questions, feel free to shoot me a tweet or an email or any other way of contacting me, or ask in the comments or the chat right now. All right. Thanks, Matt. Back to you.
Sebastiaan, the pun level of that talk was off the charts. The waffle, amazing, incredible. Right.
Well, yeah.
So what gave you the original motivation to build Gaufre?
Gaufre? Oh man, I think it was sort of like last year a competition with a friend of mine for an April Fool's joke. We kind of wanted to just build this, and he was building on a Gopher thing to play around with some sort of Node native app compiling tool. I forget what it was called. But the client was called Gaufre, C-O-F-F-R. I think it's also on NPM. So if you npx Gaufre, you'll probably be able to run something like that. And I was like, hey, why don't I build this for the web? And then at the time I was doing a lot of DNS over HTTPS stuff. And so I was like, could I just do Gopher over TLS and Gopher over HTTPS? And I just sort of like, I spent a couple of weeks hacking on this thing. It's a lot of fun. And then to build sort of another application, a new protocol support for the CDN thing that I'm working on, it was just, I don't know, it was just fun to do. And I really got into Gopher a bit too much maybe. So I dropped it was sort of incomplete last year. After a couple of weeks, I was like, this is just taking too much of my time. But a few months back, I was like, hey, I just have like 90% of this thing complete, and I ended up finishing the TLS stuff and all of that, and making sure that you can actually deploy a website and host it and all that kind of thing. So yeah, right now I'm mostly not working on the Gopher stuff, although I am working on like a new website for my project, and I'm trying to get a static site generator to support Gopher. I'm playing with Hugo, but it would be great if there was a Node.js based one that sort of dual render HTML pages as well as Gopher maps based on the same like markdown input or something like that.
Yeah, sounds like something you might be able to hack Gatsby to do or something like that.
Yeah, I looked at Gatsby. I couldn't find out how to do dual format. That's why I ended up going with Hugo, because I found it had pretty good infrastructure for that. But I might revisit that. I mean, the cool thing about Gopher is that everyone just makes their own tools as they go. Like there's so many clients that are really active for a while, and then people are satisfied with their own personal client, and then they drop it. But I am planning to maintain this support for a while, like in the network. Having a CDN for it, I think, is a nice new feature. I'll even I kind of have some drafts for the Gopher over HTTPS and TLS protocols that I'm probably going to publish, and more both because a lot of people are reinventing this same wheel, and I like my particular wheel, I guess. But also I want to kind of get more familiar with the IETF process, so I tend to write some RFC internet drafts for both of these protocols and see if I can get them published and how that's going to go. It's just more like a learning experience. The whole thing is really a big learning experience.
That'd be super cool. So you said that you got a little bit too much into Gopher. Were there any particular communities or lists or something or servers that you found that had info that just surprised you?
Yeah, absolutely. The best one that I've come across has been a Debian project mailing list for Gopher. Off the top of my head, I don't remember what it was, but I'm sure if you search for Debian mailing list Gopher, you'll come across. And that seems to be where a lot of the Gopher developers are posting stuff. Otherwise, there's a Reddit. There's actually two Reddits. It's confusing because they're not really active. There's two subreddits, sorry. But there's not, like I said, they're not very active. Other than that, it just seems like random people email each other a lot. So there's no IETF working group for Gopher. Yeah, so people working on these standards have no interest in it anymore. And I am trying to, I've also, so interestingly, Gopher was explicitly denied in the what working group HTML standard.
Hilarious.
The API
called out.
Yeah, no, it's weird. It seems to be due to the fact that Gopher used to be supported in some browsers. I think
you're just trying to get rid of maintenance craft.
Well, so there was this notion that there could be a security issue if you allowed. So you know how web pages can register schemes, like protocol schemes, to handle them. So you can have the Gmail client handle like the web-based, the URL for Gmail can handle clicks on links to mail to URLs, and you can do this for all kinds of protocols. And the list it's actually whitelisted in the spec which protocols are allowed to do this. And if you want to do a custom protocol, you have to prefix with web plus. That's a bit of weird stuff. But if you want to do like your own protocol, like Gopher, the Gopher scheme, like Gopher : / blah blah blah, it's explicitly denied. So not only is there a whitelist, there's also a blacklist which is just Gopher. So I'm trying to fix
amazing.
that. So I'm lobbying. It's a very slow program. I'm like lobbying on the Mozilla bug tracker, the Chromium bug tracker, and the what working group issues on their GitHub repository. If anyone's interested, please upvote this, because there's a lot of like old timers in this community. Obviously, the protocol is something like 30 years old almost. Who are all like sort of nostalgic about it, but don't really care too much to move anything. But I don't think there's any friction towards doing it. It's just nobody wants to do it. So maybe a couple of upvotes would be appreciated if anyone can find that issue to what working group Gopher URL thing. That would be appreciated very, very kindly.
Yeah, let's make this video the beginning of a movement.
Awesome. That's what I like about this meetup. It's very ambitious.
You never know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Awesome. Sebastiaan, that was a great talk. Thank you so much for giving it. Thanks to both of our speakers, Aori and Sebastiaan. Those are both excellent talks. We had a little bit of technical difficulties at the beginning of this thing, but we're going to edit it out. So if you're watching this and you're hearing me say this in 2 days when you watch it for the first time, that never happened. But this has been the third Wednesday of the month. It's been both the Node.js meetup and the Austin Node.js meetup. We'll be having these online streaming like this for months going forward until we can join you at a sponsored location in the future. So until then, thanks for joining now. We'll see you next month. If anybody has talks that they want to give, please send me a message either on meetup.com through one of the two meetups or on Slack. As always, join.the.nodejsmeetup.com will get you into our Slack. This meetup exists for the Node.js communities in Austin and NYC. So if you want to show us the things that you've been building, show us the things that you want to build, or talk about ideas, things you've been building at work or open source projects, get on here and show off your stuff. Let us spotlight the things that you're working on, because you are a part of the community. And by showing the great things that you're building, we can spread great ideas and inspire each other to build more great stuff on Node.js. So that's it. Thanks everybody for coming. Very much appreciated. Thanks again, speakers.